Congratulations on your new employment as one of Lady Jade's goddesses. You will find your employment here rewarding and well compensated. Get ready to feel like the goddess you are. Please be aware of the following rules for all servicing staff. Rule 1. Condoms are 100% mandatory and required in all cases with all clients. Rule number 2. When you are hired by a client, your menu of available services will be presented to them. You are not required to perform any action you have not pre-agreed to and have added to the menu. You may add or remove any services at any time that you wish. Rule number 3. Health checks every 2 weeks are mandatory. There is an on-site nurse at all times to handle any medical issues. If you ever feel unwell for any reason, please immediately contact the nurse. Rule number 4. If the nurse cannot handle what you have, she may refer you to the special nurse and contact her. Please do not be alarmed by this, and do not be shocked by the special nurse's appearance or dress. She is a very uniquely skilled professional. Rule number 5. There are 5 rooms where clients are serviced. There is a 6th room beside the lobby, nurse's office, service rooms, and shower room. Do not ever enter this room. Do not look into the peephole or cracks in the door. If you ever see someone entering this room, do not follow them. If you see someone leaving it, do not ask them about it or converse with them in any way, even if it's someone that you have talked to in the past or know. Rule number 6. Alcohol or drug use during work hours is completely prohibited. Rule number 7. A shower after servicing a client is mandatory, 100% of the time. Rule number 8. The special soaps and shampoos provided in the bathroom are mandatory for all showers. Do not bring your own, and do not ever take a soap or shampoo from the bathroom with you. Rule number 9. There is an undressing room before the shower room. Before you enter, you must remove all clothing or personal items and put it in one of the lockers. Absolutely no clothing can be worn into the shower room. If you do accidentally bring any clothing into the room, find one of the sealed plastic bags in the room. Place any articles of clothing in it, seal it very tight, and take it to the undressing room and hit the red button. A staff member will bring you a robe and will take the bag clothing to be burned. Rule number 10. Please do not converse in the showers at all, even if another goddess is using it at the same time who you are friendly with. And please do not ever mention anything you see in the showers once out to another goddess. If you see any odd marks on her body, mind your own business. Rule number 11. We do not have a goddess named Erica who works here. If you see a woman claiming to be Erica, cease conversation with her and notify security immediately. Rule number 12. If you notice a strange birthmark that resembles a skull anywhere on a client's body, terminate the session immediately and hit the red button to notify security. You will be taken to the nurse's office and she will immediately contact the special nurse. Rule number 13. Do not be afraid if you see someone dressed as a law enforcement officer on site. If they ask for what's available, go to the safe room in the lobby and use the code 321814. Remove $500 and provide it to the law enforcement officer. Rule number 14. We have law enforcement clients. Do not be alarmed if any wish to hire you. Service them like you would any other client. Rule number 15. We are open 24 hours a day, with the exception of between the times of 3:45 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. Feel free to hang out in the lobby during those hours, and make sure any clients are aware business must be terminated before that time if being hired. Please do not question anyone you see entering any of the rooms during this time. Rule number 16. Always count your tips and write it on a receipt after a session. If the tip equals a prime number, burn the money. We will compensate you. Rule number 17. As you learned during orientation, Lady Jade has a heart-shaped birthmark on her right breast. If she ever has a strange voice or something seems off about her, you can request to see it. Do not feel shy in doing so. Lady Jade will always comply. If the woman refuses to show you her breast or doesn't have the birthmark, it's not Lady Jade. Do not obey her orders and leave immediately. Notify security next. And most importantly of all, Make sure to enjoy yourself here at Lady Jade's. Welcome. The following is an account of one of Lady Jade's goddesses who worked at the brothel. First of all, just know I'm not trying to give you a sob story or looking for sympathy for how I ended up working there. It's a standard story. Here I was, a 43-year-old single mother who lost her job after over 15 years as a receptionist at an office who closed, and then learned that type of job experience doesn't open doors to way better jobs. And good luck finding a secretary job that pays as well as I got after all those raises. I ended up on Medicaid, and thank God for welfare. I took a waitressing job for lack of anything else I could get and hated everything about it except the friendship I struck up with a younger colleague. I felt cool for a while and I had a good friend who could have been my daughter, but nothing could prepare me for when she was quitting the job because she had found a much better one, and she thought that I'd be great for it too. And then she told me what it was. I assumed it was a joke at first and then almost fell over once I realized that it wasn't. She assured me she had already been working there for the past 2 weeks, that it wasn't that bad, and I didn't have to worry about any legal repercussions. The owner knew people, she said. I asked why on earth she would recommend I start at my age anyways, and she assured me that the brothel prided on offering women of all races, body types, and ages, and was lacking in ones with a mature look. After a bit, I went from thinking who would want to pay to fuck a 43-year-old to realizing that I was hard on myself. I was still pretty, and I got complimented all the time. Male customers constantly leered at me. I could do it. I didn't want to, but I could do it. But then came a hard night of realizing if I couldn't start earning a lot more money, my daughter would be taking a gap year and having to work full time to save up her own money for college. After a long night of crying and barely sleeping, I decided that this was the right path forward. I would give my life for my daughter. This in comparison was nothing, and with a heavy heart I gathered up the courage to ask her the next time I saw her how I could get signed up to go work at the brothel. And then I proceeded to cry some more that night. 1 month in, and I felt so silly for having acted that way before. This was seriously the best job I ever had. I was getting laid every night I worked. No more having to go through the awkwardness of dating at my age, and I could see why we were all called goddesses. That's exactly how we were treated by the guys. Nothing but pure respect and adoration. My favorite was the foot fetish guys who would worship my feet and suck my toes as foreplay. I basically sat there and got paid for having my feet pampered, and I can't believe it took me 43 years to learn just how heavenly having my toes sucked is. I had braced myself for legions of ugly losers, but it was nothing like that at all. Most were better looking than your typical guy at a club, and almost none were utterly repulsive. Most just wanted completely no strings attached sex, had low self-confidence, or weird kinks. Yeah, I got asked to do weird shit, but then I realized I have to empty my bladder anyway. And so if some weirdo will pay for me to piss on him instead of pissing in a toilet for free, well then why not? I technically wasn't the oldest woman who worked there, as Lady Jade was well into her 50s and she still had clients of her own. But I ended up being the team mom of sorts, and admired by the other girls. It wasn't perfect. I still had to worry about being recognized at church or PTA or at any of my daughter's basketball games. And the fact that my daughter isn't a moron and obviously would soon realize this wasn't some waitressing gig at a 24-hour restaurant that I told her this was. It didn't help that my daughter was a rebellious teenager in a completely different way. She ended up being a devout Christian, far more than me, who wasn't happy that I had sex with multiple men after my divorce and got offended when I had to talk with her about getting a birth control prescription. But it wouldn't be permanent either. I'd get my daughter a nice college fund and then find myself another office job, and that'd be the end of it. The first time I attended church Sunday evening with my daughter, I went straight to work afterwards, and I assured myself it was okay because Jesus hung out with women like me all the time. And I thought that I'd be the clever one to tell her once she realized the truth. But that could wait for another time. For now, I just loved the job. Then, the weirdness of the place kind of started to gradually gnaw on me. The rules were weird. At first I thought, whatever, it's a brothel. But I had a hard time gathering what was going on. After paying off the police a few times, I realized that this wasn't a typical bribe. The cops looked as nervous frequently as I was, and most seemed unwilling, not eager to get the bribes. I never ran into this mysterious Erica, thankfully, but I heard stories and rumors. My friend who referred me disappeared from the job in a month. I figured the place would have high attrition anyways, and Lady Jade's weird hang-up about prime numbers might be just her being a superstitious weirdo, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper to it. I couldn't get over the mind-your-own-business attitude towards everything, that I couldn't ask another goddess I had grown close to why I saw her entering the mysterious sixth room, and why we couldn't talk while we showered, or that I had to give up and have some pretty nice lingerie burned once I accidentally went into the shower before fully disrobing. But the weirdest thing was the closed for 45 minutes. Those times weren't too bad. The girls would just hang out in the lobby, but I couldn't put my finger on what was happening. At first I thought the rooms might be cleaned, until I realized the weird figures I saw going into the rooms weren't carrying cleaning supplies of any type. They were always hooded and wearing all black and spoke and whispered to each other in a language I had never heard before, and unlike any I ever heard. I saw some of them carrying odd tools in time to time, but I couldn't figure out what they were or what it was even for. But after all, I could overlook all that. I loved my job and the money was great. Until about 4 months in. I showed up to start my shift 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. as usual. Lady Jade was there and eagerly announced I had a reservation, who requested me as soon as possible and would be in room 4. I went in there and saw probably one of the best looking clients I have ever seen. He was quite young, at least 20 years younger than me, and had the perfect haircut, facial stubble, body and muscles of a pro athlete. I got so excited when the realization I was about to fuck him hit me. I then got actually embarrassed and a little anxious, so I sat down and tried to chat with him. I asked him why such a young stud like him wanted an old hag like me. "The menu," he said. "You offered what I wanted, and no one else does," he replied. I felt chilled a bit. His voice was off, like it somehow echoed in a way that human voices don't. I tried to ignore that and think about what he said. I then realized he was probably referring to anal. I had just added it to the menu a week earlier. No request yet, but I was getting very sexually adventurous and excited to try. So I asked him and he confirmed that that's what he wanted. And now I was getting nervous. Not for the fact that I'd be doing it. It was far from my first time. But from the strangeness of his voice and the weird way he spoke in short sentences and phrases, I reminded myself it's possible for a gorgeous guy to have Asperger's or something, and I've heard weird voices in here before. But the worry kind of faded away once I undressed and saw his dick. Good God. So I collected the payment and began. I grabbed the lube and one of my toys and started to prepare myself. I won't go into the details of the act, just know I loved it. As I lay in the bed savoring the good ache I felt and accepted his money, my euphoria turned to terror as he turned around and got dressed. He had a strange skull-shaped birthmark on his backside. I remember the rules. I immediately panic. I froze in panic as he got dressed, threw a tip at me, and walked out of the room. I threw on a robe and ran to the nurse. It's nothing, I told myself as I went there. I let the nurse know what happened immediately, and she turned a shade of pale. "Wait here," she said, and walked off to call someone up. I realized she was calling the special nurse. She informed me that she would be here in a half an hour. It felt like an eternity, but then the nurse and Lady Jade entered the room, and behind them followed a woman shrouded in black, much like the people entering the rooms at night. I could make out her face, but her appearance was bizarre. She could have been anywhere from 30 to 60 years old. Her hair was pure white and stringy, and her eyes had some weird, unnatural look to them. "You can be dismissed," she told the nurse and Lady Jade. Her voice had the same strange quality of the client, a weird echo and something just not human sounding about it. "I wish I could say this wouldn't hurt you, but it'll hurt a lot less than the alternative," she told me. She then pulled out a bag and then a strange-looking knife. I cried as I felt the sheer pain of it jabbing into my leg. I woke up. As I laid naked on the nurse's table, I felt groggy and my memories slowly collected again. "Wait, what happened?" I groggily asked. The normal nurse was there watching over me. "Oh, you're fine, you're good," she replied. "You were out for about an hour or so," she said. I felt my hand over my leg and remembered the incision. There was still a slight ache. I felt a scar on my leg there. How did the scar develop in an hour, though? I thought. I wanted to ask the nurse, but couldn't find the words. She then handed me a bag. "There's a bottle of pills in here. Take 2 of them a day for the next 5 days. You have the next 2 weeks off. There's also a bunch of cash in there to compensate you. Please shower and then return here to get dressed and gather your belongings. We're getting a cab to take you home," she said. I looked in the bag. "This is way more than what I make in 2 weeks," I replied. "Consider it hazard pay," said the nurse in a very nervous tone. "Okay, well, why do I have this scar already? This scar seems like it'd be weeks old. You said this just happened an hour ago," I said. The nurse ignored my question. "Please, just shower and we'll get you out of here," she said. I did. I got dressed back at her office and grabbed the bag and was escorted by the nurse to the cab. I sat silently in the back as I was taken straight home. I took the pills as requested, but didn't return after 2 weeks. I hid the cash in my closet, but it did unnerve me after seeing how much it was. I didn't feel right depositing it all at once and knew that it would attract some attention, so I deposited some, and then I opened another bank account and deposited more, and some of it I donated. I mean, this was a ton of money. I felt weird throwing some of it in my church's collection plate considering where the money came from, but I did so anyways. At least it'd go to something good. And around this time, my old boss from before I got laid off called me and informed me he landed a new job at a big corporation and had been given a generous budget to hire a personal assistant, and he wanted me. And it paid more than before. I took the job and figured I could put that strange incident at Lady Jade's in the past. There was just one issue: my daughter. I couldn't lie to her for the rest of her life, so one night I decided to tell her. I downed 2 glasses of wine and asked her to take a seat and that I had something to confess to her. She took it surprisingly well. She told me the same thought I had, that Jesus hung out with prostitutes, and talked to me how I was the victim and the one being exploited, and about how this wouldn't be needed if we ran society in a more moral way and looked after the downtrodden. She was angry about one thing though, that I had lied before, and the excuse that I did it for her. She explained to me that she loved me as much as I loved her, and then asked if I seriously thought that she would consider having her own mother prostitute herself out to be preferable to taking a gap year. I broke down in tears, realizing how short-sighted it was. She comforted me and told me that she now realized that she is incredibly blessed. "I now know just how much my mother loves me," she said. I stopped a bit and then started crying again, but now it was tears of joy. What I didn't tell her was that for most of my time there, I actually loved the job. I was reminded of a joke I had heard about how all teenagers like to pretend that they were the only person on earth who was produced asexually. Knowing that her mom actually enjoyed all that sex and kinky shit would probably traumatize her. And then it also hit me that perhaps that was her main objection to me being open about having sex after my divorce. Her beliefs on non-marital sex maybe not being the main issue. Maybe she just didn't like that I liked it. Regardless, we reached an agreement that neither one of us would ever bring it up again, and she would never tell anyone else. We would just pretend the job never happened. I decided to put it behind me and not even think about it anymore. It was a bizarre episode of my life, but it didn't need to impact it any longer. Except for one recent time. I went on my first post-prostitution date with a widowed father of one of my daughter's church group youth friends. We went out for a few drinks and thought it was going well. I then noticed sitting not too far from me was a strange figure shrouded in black. My curiosity was piqued, so I excused myself to the bathroom and walked by that person. They were mumbling some things in that strange language I had heard before, and they seemed to have their eye on me, and so I walked back to the stool. "I don't really like this place. Can we head somewhere else?" I asked him. Sure, that's fine," he replied, downing his drink and walking out. I realized how much of a weirdo I probably seemed since I suggested that bar, but he never asked why. And then later that night he drove me home. As he drove me down a city street, I realized I would be passing Lady Jade soon. Whatever, I thought. It's just a building. You don't work there anymore. But when the block approached, I shut my eyes and realized that I never want to see this again, and I want it out of my life completely, because I think I have a terrible curse. This second account is from a client of Lady Jade's, and he has many details to share. I'm not proud of what I did, obviously. I'm just glad I can report this anonymously. But please know up front, I'm not a stereotypical sleazy John. I never even thought of ever hiring a hooker until one day, the day I laid in my apartment and turned 33. It hit me that I hadn't been laid in an entire year. I had a good excuse though. The previous year had seen my fiancée of 5 years break off her engagement with me. I was first heartbroken, then depressed and angry, then just nihilistic. Dating didn't seem to matter. I hated having to get back into the pool. It's not that I was too old. I had just recently attended an aunt's wedding who had gotten married for the first time at over 50 after all. It was just so much work I wasn't used to. I didn't want to use Tinder or any of those other silly apps, but tried meeting girls to make it work. I supposed I couldn't keep pushing it off forever, and then the idea of just buying it popped into my head. And so I did some research. I found some websites and familiarized myself with the lingo, all while convincing myself I'd never actually do this. It was all out of curiosity. But one place stood out: Lady Jade's Healing Arts Center, and I found a lot of forums about it and their website. What they supposedly did wasn't clear, just vague bullshit about how they employed goddesses who'd bring healing and relief, and all sorts of euphemisms. It was the most obvious front ever. I found their website, but it was cheaply done and obviously not updated in years. The few girls pictured on it looked hot, even if the pics were out of focus and often not showing their faces. And my curiosity was definitely up, but I didn't plan on ever going there. I was just looking around. But one night, it took an odd occurrence. My air conditioning broke and it was a super hot July night. I laid in bed sweating, wondering how to get to sleep. I couldn't get a new unit or get it fixed until the next day, so I figured my only choice was to find a hotel for the night. I decided to go cheap. After all, this would be just a one-night thing, so I headed to the part of town the cheap motels are. And then I saw it in person. It should shock no one that Lady Jade's was also located in the area. I stopped because I realized I could go inside. It was open 24 hours after all, and it probably had air conditioning. I parked a few blocks away, in shame almost, and I went into a 24-hour gas station and made a large ATM withdrawal. As I walked over to it, I realized that if I went in, I was stuck doing it. I couldn't make up some story about wrong address or not being sure what it was at this hour. I slowly paced away and then I walked back to it again. Come on, I thought. It was too prominent, too classy from the reviews I'd read to be some nasty human trafficking front. What's the harm? YOLO, I thought as I took a breath and walked in. There was air conditioning. Great. And it was well painted and decorated. A young and very well-dressed woman greeted me at the front behind a desk. "Welcome to Lady Jade's," she said with a perky and chipper demeanor, reminding me of a classy restaurant hostess. "Have you been here before?" she said. No, I have not," I answered almost under my breath, but it didn't deter her. "Please take a seat," she said and pointed toward a comfy leather chair nearby. She then handed me an iPad. "This includes the goddesses currently on staff and services provided. Please let me know of your selection and I will make sure the goddess is ready and the room will be prepared," she said. I looked at the iPad and then the pics. There were 5 women available. Mina, a petite and delicate-looking young Asian. Jackie, a voluptuous and curvy black woman who appeared to be about early 30s. Carolyn, a fairly mature-looking white brunette, probably mid-40s. Kiki, a thin but full-bodied young blonde, mid-20s I thought. And Carly, a very young-looking perky redhead who was probably just barely legal. Their menus were next to each of them with all sorts of euphemisms that I had read online. But I wasn't looking for anything kinky, just a quick, easy lay. I walked up to the receptionist and requested Kiki. I was informed that she would be available in room 8 in about 10 minutes and was provided with a glass of water while I waited. It was the best water I've ever had, to be honest. My heart was racing when the receptionist announced that my room was ready and led me there. I noticed 5 rooms labeled 1, 4, 6, 8, and 9. That's weird, I thought. I also saw a bath and shower room that had medical symbol on it too. It probably also led to some sort of first aid kit or nurse office, and had an unmarked 6th room next to all the main rooms. I stepped into room 8. Kiki met me. She was indeed the same woman in the pics. When I told her the euphemism of what I wanted, she laughed. "Listen, you're here with me, okay? No need to use that talk," she said. "Just tell me what you want." "Fine," I said. "I want to have sex." She replied and laughed. "Well, I can provide that," with a slutty tinge. I undressed and got on the bed. She looked at me, sized me up, and then grabbed the appropriate size box of condoms from a drawer and then removed her clothing. I won't get into the details, but I wasn't regretting my pick once I saw her naked. "So, do you like your job?" I said nervously while she stripped. She assured me that she did. It was very safe and, as she put it, a combination of her 2 favorite things, sex and money. This ain't a porno, so I won't go into the details of what happened. Just know that my head was spinning when it was done and it was a good experience. Did she know how to please? Absolutely. I gave her a large and deserving tip. I supposed it was time to be on my way, but laid in bed soaking in the feeling. She informed me we had to leave soon. It was 3:20 a.m., and at 3:30 a.m., it was the time, she said, when the rooms were closed. On that note, I had to get dressed quickly. We both did and walked out of the room. But frankly, my appetite was whet. I needed more. My libido was still racing, and I knew I could do a second round. Maybe after the closed room time. I sat in the lobby as the girls watched TV. An episode of The Big Bang Theory was on. Kiki assured me I could hang out too and hire her or another girl for another round once the rooms opened at 4:15 a.m., but I would have to not speak to anyone but the girls. It was then I noticed the strange hooded figures going into the rooms. Must be cleaning, I thought, although they were very weird-looking custodial staff. They had on very strange dark uniforms and seemed to be muttering some odd language, not one I'd ever heard. It wasn't until after I left I realized they weren't carrying any cleaning supplies either, but that wasn't on my mind. Kiki also wasn't present. Explaining policy required a shower after every single session, so I was just sitting by myself with the other girls lounging around. Then, one approached me. "Hello there, I'm Erica," she said, and I turned and saw her. Erica was a unique look. Not all guys would go for her. Very voluptuous and curvy. By my BMI health standards, she was probably obese, though not morbidly so. Her breasts didn't do so much as they practically spilled out of her corset. She had nerdy thick glasses and her hair was so red it looked like a long trail of fire rolling off her head down to her waist. She was probably in her 20s, but who knows where in that range. In a weird way, her flaws kind of enhanced the sexy things about her. I was intrigued. We talked a bit and she was very vague about her background, and didn't give many details to me at all. She had just said that she had been there a while. I figured girls would do this to try and land clients and she would offer me a room once this was done. Sure enough, after a bit, that's what she said. "Maybe you'd like to come and play with me," she asked. I caved in. My libido was still rushing and I still had leftover money, and so she led me into room number 9. Room number 9 looked exactly the same on the inside as room 8, unsurprisingly. I was a bit shocked as soon as we got in that she started undressing immediately. I slowly got out of my clothes and she sat down naked next to me, and I looked at her body. I was starting to regret my choice a bit. There were skin rolls abound. Her areolas were huge, and she was probably one of the few women today who went all natural, with no pubic hair shaving at all. Just a curly forest down there. Also, she had more tattoos than I typically care for, but I could overlook that. I've dated overweight women before and can appreciate a BBW, but she just seemed a little weird, in ways I can't explain well. "So, what do you want to do?" she asked me. Maybe just a blowjob," I replied. All my clothes were off now except my underwear. I gradually slid them off, exposing myself to her finally. I was getting nervous. She smiled and said perkily, "Sure," and then started. I got a little worried. I remembered Kiki saying condoms were always mandatory for everything, and she didn't bother with a condom. Sure, it's not like I could get her pregnant, but I still had STD concerns. I thought about stopping her, but for now I didn't. I watched her back from my position and her tattoos seemed to move in a weird way, not with the body's movement. I couldn't quite make out what they were, very odd symbols and not the sort of Chinese ones people get tattooed either. She also had some moles and birthmarks and they didn't seem to stay in place either. I was getting more and more unnerved. I started losing my cool and my arousal. Then, something hit me. Why wasn't she on the iPad menu that I got when I came in? Maybe she could have started her shift later, but why start at 4 a.m.? The weirdness just overwhelmed me. Listen, sorry, but I don't think I want to do this anymore," I said, and she stopped. I got up and immediately threw my clothes back on. She looked very sad. "We can try something else. I know you might be nervous," she said. "Sorry," I replied. "I just think I should leave." I gave her a $20 tip for the time so far and quickly threw my clothes on. She gave a very annoyed huffing reaction and got dressed as well. I didn't bother looking, I just tore out of the room. As I walked outside, I ran into the receptionist again. "Thank you for stopping by at Lady Jade's," she remarked. "Did you enjoy your time here?" "Well, I gotta be honest," I said. "The first girl was mind-blowing, and I loved that, but the second was a bit disappointing," I said. "Oh, well, what goddesses did you see here?" she said in a somewhat disappointed tone. "Kiki and Erica," I replied. Her look turned to confusion and a bit of panic. "Erica?" she replied. "Yeah, Erica. She was kind of a unique look, as you probably know, and that lured me in, but in the end, she just wasn't for me. I'm sure there are some guys out there that appreciate her look, of course," I said. "What did you do with Erica?" she stated firmly in a very serious tone. "Well, nothing really," I said with some embarrassment. "I started receiving oral from her but broke it off after barely a minute." "Oh, okay, alright, good," the receptionist said. She looked slightly relieved but still concerned. She handed me 5 $20 bills from under the counter. "Please take this. I hope your next visit to Lady Jade's goes better," she said. I was a little shocked but wasn't going to dispute a partial refund. I walked out of there and back to my car, confused as I ever was. Suffice to say, I never returned to Lady Jade's. Just 2 months after that incident, I started hanging out with a new woman at my job and we eventually fell in love with each other. She's a beautiful, loving, and truly caring single mom, and I want no one else in the world. I'm trying not to rush into an engagement this time, but it means my intimate needs are being met. But then one day we decided to check out a restaurant in that area that had good reviews and she wanted to go to. She couldn't find a sitter that night, so we just ended up taking her daughter with us. I ended up on the street near Lady Jade's as we went there, and my girlfriend's daughter took note. "Wow, that's a weird building," she called out from the back seat. "What is that place?" she remarked. "I don't know, Emily," her mother said with a sigh. "We'll be there soon. Please just stay calm," she said. "Yeah, I don't know either," I said. "Honestly, in this area, it's probably better not knowing," I remarked as I drove by it. But then I had a sinking feeling, a jolt in the back of my mind, and then I could start to see skulls flashing as I drove, and I realized that Lady Jade's brothel might have some sort of an evil curse.